Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Door to Door. I'm Virginia Stanley, Director of Library Marketing at HarperCollins. Well, we have a juggernaut special today with two juggernaut authors. We have Jeffrey Archer and Anthony Horowitz sharing the screen together to talk about their forthcoming books, both on sale on October 19th. We are just so excited to listen to them, to ask them questions, to find out more about their forthcoming publications. So when I say that this is a huge, huge honor, it is an understatement, honestly. Jeffrey Archer, Anthony Horowitz, huge New York Times bestsellers, London bestsellers. We don't have enough time to go into the accolades, but I just wanted to bring you both on for a second, just to talk with each other, to say a few words, and then we will divide up the hour so that we can dive deep into each author's books. So, Jeffrey, Anthony, hello and welcome.
Hello, and thank you very much for allowing Anthony to come on with me. I normally don't go down market, but I suppose sometimes one must try and help someone who's desperate to make their name. So yes, I agreed to go on with Anthony Horowitz, and I will tolerate him for an hour. Have I got you for an hour, Anthony?
You know, Jeffrey, for much less. I'm just the warm-up act, so you have.
You're the warm-up.
Minutes back. Try. I know it's hard to resist. We must try to avoid hurling insults in my direction. I am very proud and very happy to be your support.
Why should I stop hurling insults in your direction? You're among the most talented writers in the world, and you know, basically, I'm livid with you because you don't settle down to do one thing. You don't give us one. If you'd given us book after book, look at someone like Lee Child, who isn't in your class, but he doesn't do 5 different books in 5 years. Explain yourself, young man.
Well, I will say this to those listening. I'm very happy to say that Jeffrey Archer and myself have known each other for quite a long time now, for probably 5 or 10 years, in fact. I would even like to suggest that we might, despite the evidence, be friends. And Jeffrey has always given me very, very good advice about my career. He introduced me to my agent and has given me, and incidentally, I should also say, Jeffrey, that your books have always been an inspiration to me. Your narrative brilliance, which is really unparalleled, has been something which I try in my own small way to emulate. But the point is that I have said this to you, I have a lot of ideas. That's the trouble. And I don't just want to do, like Lee Child, do 27 Alex Riders or 37 James Bonds or whatever it's going to be. I rather like the idea that writing is an adventure and that every day brings something new. So even though I may have sacrificed my place on the bestseller lists, I'm not unhappy with the sort of progress I have made, despite your admittedly excellent advice.
Well, I'm going to tell you people now who are listening, you librarians, and don't want to sort yourself out between 6 different Anthony Horowitz books. Look up his book on the great detective Sherlock Holmes. It's thrilling from beginning to end. It's as good as anything Sherlock Holmes wrote. You will love it. Don't look for that tonight, and you'll see what my grumble is about him continually changing his movement.
There might be a pause while we get some medication in there, because Jeffrey, you are getting, I know it's very hot out there where you are, and instead of pouring with rain where I am, but we should try not to be too heated about this. I think, look, every writer you're right, you're absolutely, I don't deny what you are saying, that I would have had a much, much easier career. I think writers do need to be, to a certain extent, pigeonholed. You know, you are the storyteller. You are known for your historical, your wonderful, huge family sagas and sort of style of Galsworthy. That is what you are. And it is true that I have done all sorts of different things in my career to my own detriment. But I can't help myself. And anyway, it's much too late now. I'm too old to actually settle down and write sort of 10 Sherlock Holmeses, even if that is what you want.
Pathetic.
Oh dear, this is not going well.
Well, this has been lovely.
For you, maybe, Virginia, for you. I'm sitting here feeling I feel shriveling in my seat.
Though I repeat, read his Sherlock Holmes book. It's brilliant.
Well, I get my own section in a moment. Once we get, how do we turn Jeffrey off? Where's the button on this screen that turns Jeffrey off?
Turn me off.
It's this. I'm so happy because you guys were doing this before we went on live, and I thought, oh, I hope that they continue this, and
I hope you wouldn't, but there you go.
Wonderful ribbing with all of the greatest admiration that you have for each other, and that's quite obvious. So, but nice try.
It is true, that one of the things you should be aware of, that the writers in this world that we inhabit are all very, very supportive of each other. It is one of the nicest things. And Geoffrey has genuinely given me help in the past, as have many, many other writers. And I love the sense of community, that we know each other so well and can be so free and easy with each other, even in public. And underneath it all, Geoffrey adores my James Bond novels, has read all my Hawthorne novels, and will promote Magpie Murders and Moonflower Murders and all the other books when he has his opportunity later, I'm sure.
During his half hour.
He'll spend most of his half hour, I'm sure.
Do you find, Anthony, as I do, that I get a lot of young people now getting in touch and asking about writing their first novel? And of course, you and I know the truth, that it's very, very difficult, a first novel, and it's very, very difficult to become established, recognized, and respected. And you have to take each human being seriously, because sometimes they have just spent the last year or the last 2 years doing this very, very important thing. And it's just possible that they won't get onto the bestsellers list. My first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, only sold 3,000 copies. And I rushed down to get a Sunday Times because I was confident that I would be in the top 10, only to discover years later, I wasn't in the top 100.
I didn't know. And I thought Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less was an almost immediate hit. That's what I'd always assumed.
It's one of the myths. Cain and Abel sold 1 million copies in the first week. Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less has subsequently sold 27 million copies. But up until then, it had only sold about 62,000.
So was Cain and Abel your breakthrough novel?
Oh, totally.
And what number was that, Geoffrey? That was number
3.
3. So pretty young, because after with me, I wrote 10 books, but sold pitiful amounts. I mean, really 3,000 or 4,000 before I wrote Alex Rider's Stormbreaker, and that began a ball rolling and in the world of YA fiction that sort of, catapulted me into the bestseller list. And what worries me, and what you were saying just there, which I think you're absolutely right in, Stanley, is that young people today do not get the same chances that we did, because publishers are so hungry for that first instant bestseller. They will not sit back and support their writers through book after book that does not perform.
I hadn't realized it had taken you 10 books, and the point you're making is correct. No one would get a 10-book chance nowadays. Frankly, some of them don't get a 2-book chance. It's very, very cruel if you're a beginner nowadays.
It's an incredibly competitive field. And I think it is, the idea of getting published when I was young was sort of, that was it, you'd done it. Nowadays, it can be the falling point. It can be nothing can come of it. And it's frightening. I mean, there are benefits to being the age that I am, which is that, I've banked my career, as it were. And it is so much tougher now.
Yeah,
when young people come to me, we don't need you, Virginia. It's very kind, but we don't.
I'm going to go lay down.
When young people come to me now, Anthony, I am very, I think the only word is frank and honest. 2 words are frank and honest. I say to them, this is my line. Why don't you go to the ballet? And they say, what do you mean, Geoffrey? And I say, if you go to the ballet and you watch the Bolshoi and you see the prima ballerina, ask yourself how many hours it has taken her to be on stage. And then look at the chorus behind, and look at the girls who are in the chorus, and ask yourself, how many hours have they spent wanting to be on that stage? And then ask yourself, how many young girls are there all over the world desperate to be on that stage with them? And then I say to them, why would it be any different for an author who wants to be #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list?
Yeah, I mean it is an interesting parallel. I mean, I say this to young people, which is, this is the oldest advice you can give a young person writing. I think you've got to believe in yourself. When you write that book, you've got to believe you are going to be that ballet dancer, you are going to be that prima donna, and you are going to be on the Bolshoi. You're not going to be in a little tiny theater in the back of some sort of godforsaken Russian village no one's ever heard of. You've got to, I think, with every word that you write, to believe in that dream and to follow it and to write with all that energy and enthusiasm. Because again, when I'm talking to young people, my line is this: there's only one difference between a successful writer and an unsuccessful writer. The unsuccessful writer gives up. You have to follow the dream.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, that's very tough. But in your own case, dare I say, that would have meant you writing 10 books. Or perhaps, actually, that's the truth. You did write 10 books, and Alex Rider was the incredible breakthrough. But what one has to ask, Anthony, if you were now 23, 24, would you still write 10 books if you weren't making any breakthrough? And would a publisher stick with you?
Well, second question, perhaps not. To the first question, definitely. I was born a writer. I am not a multi-talented person. I have only the one skill. I write, I can tell stories, and I can do mysteries and the rest of it. But I don't think, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer, in all honesty. Would I have found something else that gave me satisfaction? Would I become a teacher? I wanted to be an actor or a theatre director. I'd have loved to have done those things. But I think I was born to write. I think I found myself when I had a pen in my hands. I mean, I know you, like me, have a collection of lovely fountain pens. You have rather more than I do. But don't you get that feeling when you put a pen into your hand, but you are, for that moment, at that moment, complete? And that is you, that is your identity, that is what you are in this world to do.
I feel it in a more simple level. I think I've been very privileged to be given a simple gift. Now, you quite rightly, and this is not being clever, Anthony, you quite rightly are better educated than I am, and you're more rounded in your reading than I am. I think I'm a simple storyteller, and it's a God-given gift. And in that way, I wanted to be lucky, because unlike you, I wasn't born wanting to be a writer. I first wanted to be captain of the England cricket team, which few Americans will understand. I then wanted to be prime minister, and I failed hopelessly at both. And when I wrote Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, I did believe I might be a storyteller. And 42 years later, I know that I got lucky and fulfilled Proust's claim that we all end up doing the thing we're second best at.
Well, second best for you maybe, but for me, there was no alternative. And I take you up on Cindy. Your storytelling is not, you said, a simple storytelling. There is nothing simple about what you do. That is what is extraordinary about your writing, Geoffrey, which is there is really nobody that I can think of who has such a command of story. And story is a peculiar thing. I always say to young people again, that novels, books are like rivers. There is something that runs through, a current, a tide that runs through a book. It's true of the greatest writers in the world. Look at Dickens, one of my favorite writers. There is a compelling narrative quality to his books you just simply cannot put down. Who is giving Pip the money? Where has his wealth come from? Where is he going to marry Estella? You just follow that flow. You do that so brilliantly, and I think that it is not simple. It is innate, maybe, and for you it might seem simple, but I have read so many books that cannot do that and get it wrong, and where you get into tied in knots and snarled up, and the inevitable result of that is you either don't get to the end or you don't pick up the writer's second one.
But you and I have something else in common, Anthony, as we do with Charles Dickens. We're both out-of-work actors. That's the truth. And you're quite right about narrative. It's an interesting comment for a professional like yourself to make, because I often realize when I'm reading someone who wants to be a storyteller, they're absolutely brilliant at describing the trees in the field outside their garden. They're absolutely brilliant and then even describing the characters on paper. But once they speak, it's lost completely, because you don't believe that's what they'd say. And I don't know about you, but I spend hours on that. I'm on the 9th draft of my latest book, and I'm still doing sentences in speech out loud clearly when two people are speaking to each other, delivering the sentence and then the next sentence and then the next sentence, which I write down and I say out loud. Is that the way you do it?
It's different for me. When I'm writing speech, I write faster than when I'm writing description. And the reason is that I've got my two characters, I've got the situation in which they find themselves, the room or the street or whatever it may be, and they're talking to each other. And suddenly I become like a stenographer in a court. And all I'm doing is writing as fast as I can. And it's why I use pen in order to catch their words before I forget what I've just heard. It's a little bit like trying to catch up with them. And so I don't need to read the dialogue afterwards. I've already heard it.
Do you have the problem I once had quite recently in a book? I did a series called the Clifton Chronicles, in which there was a wonderfully evil woman called Lady Virginia, who I absolutely adored, and was based on 3 evil women I'd known. And I decided I was going to kill her off, or I was going to finish her off. I was going to put her in court, and I want to know if this has happened to you, Anthony. I was going to put her in a different way, but it happened to you. I was going to put her in the witness box, and I was going to have the QC take her apart. And at the end of the QC's 30 minutes, 1 chapter, she'd be finished. And I got up that morning at 6 o'clock and I went to my desk and I wrote the description of court number 1 at the Old Bailey. I then had the QC coming in, who was my hero. The QC was standing up there going to kill her. And in comes this evil woman and stands in the witness box. And I write a sentence that I think will kill her. But the next sentence that came, Anthony, came straight back and dealt with him. So I thought, wait a minute. And I read the next sentence, and once again she came back and hit him on the nose. And by the end of the hour, she demolished him. But that isn't what I'd planned at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I think that's one of the joys of writing. And I have to say, I did adore Lady Virginia. You're very, very good at evil people. I'm sure it's no reflection on yourself, but you do relish these characters. And I think I do know what you're saying. Yes, I tend to keep my characters behaving themselves. They don't step out of line if I can help it. But I do like that moment when you get to a point in a scene where you've planned everything and somehow it just changes on the screen or on the page in front of you, and you find yourself being taken by surprise. I think that, again, it's something I say to young writers. If you, the writer, are surprised and excited by what is happening on the page, they, the readers, will be surprised and excited too. If everything is going exactly to plan and it's all formulaic, then it will come across as a bit of a ploddy read.
I agree with that. Not only do I agree with that, I would add to it. I never plan more than 2 or 3 pages ahead. And my reason is quite simple. If I don't know where it's going, how can the reader know where it's going? So often it takes off in a direction I haven't planned. But I can honestly say that I've never had I've never had a letter saying, well, I worked it out on page 3 exactly what you were doing, Geoffrey, because I don't know on page 4 myself.
That's not how your books read, and it's certainly not how I write my books. I do a very, very careful structure at the beginning of it. But again, talking to kids, what I always say is this. If I was going to visit Paris, I'd need a map. So that I could say, I'm going to start by visiting the Louvre in the morning, and I'm going to walk down the river towards the Eiffel Tower. And I know where they are, I know how far they are, and now I can do it. And that map gives me a guidance of Paris. So I don't just end up going up and down cul-de-sacs and getting lost. However, the fact that I have done that planning means that I can abandon it at any time I want to and change my direction and go in another direction, because my map, my structure, will show me how to get back to where I want to be. So in other words, I'm not just sort of going off aimlessly. There's always a plan there. I just don't need to use it.
Well, I confess, in the case of the William Warwicks, I decided that William, while at school, wanted to be in the Metropolitan Police. I then decided that I would try to do something different. He would go into the Metropolitan Police despite his father, Sir Julian Warwick, QC, wanting him to read law at Oxford and join him in Chambers. But then I made the big decision. I will have him as a constable in book 1 when he becomes a detective, and we'll watch him go through the ranks. So he becomes a detective sergeant, a detective inspector, a detective chief, and if I live long enough, and I have to remind you, Anthony, that I'm 81, if I live long enough, he will reach Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. So I have a structure, as you describe it, in 8 books. My problem, Anthony, is that I have to live long enough to get him there. He's already a chief inspector, but I haven't given up.
Well, you have to be careful also, because you have a habit of your quintologies suddenly becoming sort of sex or sept or octologies, whatever. They expand outwards. And the Clifton Chronicles, I seem to remember, got longer. You know, it was longer than you expected it to be at the beginning.
Yes, but I've done another thing which I hope you'd approve of. Not only is he a different rank in each book, but I do a different subject. So Nothing Ventured is art fraud. And the second book is drugs. The third book is police corruption. And the one I'm working on at the moment that's coming out in October is Over My Dead Body is Murder, where my hero, William Warwick, is given 4 unsolved murders, cold cases, and he's got to solve them because they think he's the best. So that's all the structure I've got so far. And next I will be going on to Royal Protocol.
You're very good on titles, by the way. Are the 4 murders connected?
Well, you could read them separately. You could pick up any one of them. But wherever you pick him up, he'll be doing another subject and he'll be another rank. So that doesn't matter. And the connection is he remains married to the woman he married. His children are there. His life structure is there. His commanding officer, the Hawk, is there. The rogue Hogan is there. And Faulkner, the evil genius, is there. Yes, they will run through everything, partly because my wife says, don't kill off the baddies.
Well, Geoffrey, I hate to say this to you, but you have just contradicted yourself, because earlier you said you only know 2 or 3 pages ahead. But in the last minute, you managed to give us an extraordinary breakdown of 4 novels out of a series of 8, with the entire shape built in, some of the characters, a lot of the plots. So what's happening is your brain is just hardwired to story, to narrative, I think. You may not need to write down a structure, but when you begin, it seems to me that it's all pretty much there anyway.
That's a fair point, because I've never written down a structure. That's a very fair point. And if you have hit on that, I've been genuinely unaware of it, because I don't do, David Cornwell, John le Carre told me that he used to cover his walls in bits of paper so that when he'd finished a chapter, he could go up and see what was going to happen next. And I always thought that was sort of anti-storytelling almost.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I mean, I just have, I mean, you know, that's a page out of my notebook. That's the plan. I'm not going to show it quite quickly because I want people to know what it's about. I'm writing a Bond novel at the moment, and that's a plan for chapters 9 through to 17.
Why are you writing a Bond novel? Mr. Fleming did quite a good job without you.
I know, but he's not around to do any more, unfortunately. And the Ian Fleming estate are unable to find themselves, somewhat a clairvoyant or whatever, have had to come to a living writer, and they have, the 3rd time, I'm happy to say, chosen me. And I love Bond. Bond was a great inspiration to me as a child, and it is so exciting to be doing my 3rd one, and probably my last one in my trilogy, my Bond trilogy.
I confess that I've loved your Bond books, but then as a child, at the age of 16, 17, when I'd advanced beyond just William, I discovered Mr. Bond, and Mr. Fleming, by any standards, was not a great writer, but he was a damn good storyteller.
Well, that's absolutely true. I think he was also a better writer when he's credited with 2. He was my great discovery around about the age of 11 and 12. And
see, you were ahead of me again. I didn't get to him till I was 16, 17. You got him at 11 or 12. No wonder.
It's age Jeopardy. 1963 was the first Bond film, and of course it was huge at that time. I was 8 years old, and that prompted me to look at the books, and that's why a couple of years later I started reading the books.
Which was the first one?
From Russia with Love. No, Casino Royale. Casino Royale. Casino Royale is the first.
Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Because I took my wife, to whom I've been married to for 55 years. I took her to Dr. No, which that was the first film I ever took.
First film, that's right, yes.
And it's amazed she's still there after 55 years. And that's not the only reason one should be amazed she's still there after 55 years.
Well, the power of James Bond, clearly.
I'm afraid to say anything.
Oh, you're still with us, Virginia.
Sorry, do you have any questions for either of us? You want to?
Whoops, she's disappeared again.
I'm back. Oh my God, this has been so, you should see the comments. Everybody loves this. This conversation is perfect and also the easiest
But
interview I've
Anthony
ever
is
done.
right. Do you have any particular questions you want to hurl at us?
Okay, sure. We could just
Get
do
on with
whatever
it.
we
Get
want.
on with it. Get on with it, Virginia. Get on with it.
God, you're scaring me. All right. All right. Yes. I mean, I don't want to interrupt though, you know?
It is interesting. I remember interviewing Jeffrey. I don't know, you must remember Jeffrey. I interviewed you in Dubai, in a theatre of 1,000 people, and it was a little bit like this. So once, maybe we should do it more often, because once you and I get started, it just sort of happens. And I rather like the sort of the informality of a session where it isn't just questions from the audience and answers, you know, where do you get your ideas and what's your next book about, but actually to get down to the, you know, it's a great privilege to be able to talk to another writer, particularly another, you know, very, very successful writer, about our trade, about our art, because we spend so much time. I don't know about if you find this to be the case. I spend so much time doing what I'm doing instinctively that talking to an audience or talking about another writer about how I do it and why I do it allows me to evaluate it for the first time. It actually changes in a way the way I write, because I can begin to think about, why do I do this? Why do I have a structure? Why do my characters behave the way I want them to? When I'm writing, I don't have a set of rules pinned to the wall. It's just what I do.
I remember that interview. I remember that interview in Dubai very well indeed. And indeed, you're quite right. A vast amount of people turned out to see us, which is always.
See you, Jeffrey. I was merely there as the interrogator in that one, and I'm not being modest. It really was I was merely roped in, paid actually paid nothing to do it. Now I think about it.
But I think you're right about, if you're interviewed by someone who's been through what you've been through, they not only know the right questions to ask, but they also have had the same experience. Now, I was in Jaipur recently. Well, recently, COVID makes everything feel recent, but actually it was 2 years ago. And shocked by, I'm sure you've been to India, Anthony, shocked by the new generation in India. They are so talented and so bright, but it really is quite frightening. I was speaking to a school, beautifully run school, and when I met the headmistress, I thought, I only wish I'd been taught by you. But a young boy came up to me, age 12, to discuss Cain and Abel and asked me questions, and I answered them. He's 12 years old, Anthony, and I answered them as best I could. And then, wanting to move on to the next person who was wanting to ask me a question, I said, you know, I have written other books. And he said, I've read every one of them. Yeah. Age 12. And I realized there's a generation in India now who are genuinely going to excite the world, and particularly their young women, because they're coming through for the first time. I casually said to the head girl of the school, thinking I was just being polite, what will you be doing next? And she said, oh, I'm going up to Somerville College, Oxford. So I realized straight away that we have a very exciting generation of young people who are going to be given chances that their former generation, even their parents, weren't given.
You're absolutely right. And incidentally, that Jaipur festival is one of the great festivals in the whole world. You know, and it's absolutely free. Nobody pays to come to any of the sessions. There are no tickets to anything. And yet people travel from all over India to come to hear writers like yourself and indeed me talking at these festivals. And they sleep on the station platform, or they sleep in friends' houses, wherever they can. There is this enormous thirst for knowledge and for education in India. And you're absolutely right. The young people I have met out there have been formidably impressive. And it does make you think about the future of the world when an education system is so hypercharged.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the sad things for me, I was traveling in from Dubai I keep saying quite recently, and all of us mean 2 years ago. I was traveling into Dubai, and I said to my publisher, my Indian publisher, oh, look, there's Picasso. And he said, I beg your pardon? Oh, no, sorry, on the other side of the stage. Oh, look, there's Dickens. He said, I beg your pardon? Oh, I've just spotted Newton. What are you talking about? He said. How do we know? I said. Well, there are so many children sitting on the side of the road without the opportunity to advance. I have never believed in equality. I have always believed in equality of opportunity. And India probably has even more talent that it's not being allowed to discover.
I'm sure, unlike me, you'll have. I mean, the contrasts in India are so shocking, especially to somebody like me. And I remember going into a school in India where very, very smartly presented children, boys and girls, asked me a series of very, very searching questions and were clearly very literate, very well informed and educated. Yet opposite the school was a rubbish heap, a dumping ground where other children were living, and one road separates these two lives, and that of course is the riddle, the shocking riddle and the enigma of India, and how these two halves will ever somehow find a middle ground is I would have said one of the greatest challenges facing it, the country.
Can I show you Jaipur? Perhaps you can't see it. Can you see it, Virginia?
Yep.
See a huge crowd. Yes.
7,500 people came to hear me in Jaipur. It was just, I actually will tell you, Anthony, I've never told anyone this. I burst into tears and I had to turn around and face the other way. And I understood for the first time the emotion that comes with something like that. I literally walked on the stage and burst into tears.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. Jaipur is an overwhelming experience anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, that size of crowd, and you don't know how far they've traveled and how important it is for them to be there and to hear you speak and how much they get from it. It's so very different. I mean, I love Hay-on-Wye, I love Edinburgh and Chichester, but the sort of the hunger and the sort of the dynamism of that festival, it's unique. And I just, one of my great hopes, one of the things I've missed most, if I may say so, during COVID, I must ask you how COVID has been for you. Obviously, you've been very productive. But the funny thing is, everyone says that writers, because we're isolated and on our own in a room anyway, probably haven't noticed COVID, but I have certainly noticed it and felt it, the isolation. And the thing I have missed more than anything else, more than theatre, more than family even, has been literary festivals like Jaipur, like all the festivals I've gone to around the world, where I've had the pleasure of making friends with writers like yourself and many, many other writers, but also meeting readers and having that one moment in the writer's life where, as I was saying earlier, where you can actually have a little bit of self-exploration at the same time as meeting the people who keep us going, who read our books. I have missed them terribly. And I worry they won't come back. That's my biggest worry.
Oh, I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong.
I think they will come back, but I think they will take time. I mean, international travel and the whole sense of, people are used to this world of Zooms now, and who isn't going to start saying, well, look, we can get Anthony and Jeffrey together in anywhere in the world at the flick of a button. So why go to the expense and trouble of putting them on planes and shipping them out? I hope that is not the case. I mean, Zoom is a brilliant, invention, and it does. I have an idea for a since I'm meant to be talking about murder mystery, I do have an idea for a murder taking place on Zoom, where somebody in one screen on Zoom, here's me top right, murders Virginia, who is top left, even though we are supposedly thousands of miles away from each other. I'm sure that there is a way of doing that. If you can work it out, Jeffrey, it's an idea I bequeath to you.
No, I can see now why you're so pathetic. You have 100 ideas every day, and you don't even know which one to do. That's a brilliant idea you just announced to the world, Anthony. If I may say, typical of that amazing brain of yours that goes off in 10 directions. I wanted to put another thing to you about COVID. I felt you would have been in your home with your wife and children. I was in Cambridge with Mary, and she, of course, was missing the fact that as chairman of the Science Museum had been closed. I mean, there was this woman who's the first woman ever to chair a national gallery or museum, and she's not being allowed to chair it. But we both agreed on one thing, in my case. What a privilege to be a writer and be allowed to continue doing what you would do normally. For example, my friend Chris Beatles. He's had a hell of a year in his West End gallery because no one's been to his West End gallery. And one of my favorite restaurants in the Fulham Road, Lucio's, has been closed. And he said he almost went under. So they had completely different experiences to me. And my son, William, who, as you saw on the screen for a few moments ago, he said he met a lady in the park when their children were on the slides. And she said she was a single mother with 3 children in a high-rise flat. And I thought, my God, I've been lucky.
Of course, Jeffrey. There hasn't been a day. I mean, I sometimes find myself complaining about sort of loneliness and sort of sense of isolation, all the rest of it, and the things that I'm missing. And you're absolutely right. I have to kick myself and remember I am so privileged to have the space to be able to live and to continue my profession. But I will say this. Excuse me. I will say this. During COVID, what we do, our writing, books, not just you and me, but the whole writing community, has become a lifeline for so many people. As you probably know, book sales during the COVID, the 18 months, have actually spiked. They've gone up 5%. I think 20 million books have been sold in England during COVID. And although, again, I am so upset and sad for the independent bookshops who have had to close their doors, and even for the book chains who have all have to give away to a well-known company providing all the books. Nonetheless, for young people, for old people, for all people, stories, your sorts of stories, adventure stories, romances, mysteries, murder mysteries, have been a fantastic support during this time. The one escape that's been available to us, and looking for little silver linings in the sort of the misery of the last 18 months, it is that the value of books and of libraries and of independent bookshops has, I think, been restated and reaffirmed. And in the future, I hope people won't forget how necessary they were.
Yes, I hope that's true. I mean, I know the first part is true. Something you said earlier about whether it will all return to normal, because you mentioned the small bookshop. When I was a child, browsing in a small bookshop, chatting to the owner about what I should be reading was all part of growing up. And if that's to be taken away from me, because I still go into Hatchard's in Piccadilly and say to the girl on the counter, well, what should I be reading? And they come up, oh, have you considered this, Jeffrey? And I go away with something I might not have purchased. So I hope those days come back, Anthony.
Well, independent bookshops have really struggled, of course, but they are, I don't know how many have gone out of business, but I mean, I do know independent bookshops like the Book Emporium in Woodbridge, just down the road from here. And it is wonderful that they are, a bookshop is the soul of a high street. A high street without a bookshop is just a sort of it is a stretch of consumerism that one can sort of avoid. And it is extraordinary how local bookshops know what their customers want. So it's not just a question of going in and saying what's in the top 10. It's more a case of saying, no, this is a book you should really try. I loved it, or someone I know loved it. And of course, one of the great joys in life is to be recommended a book which you know nothing about, which you've never heard of before, but which you start to read and find you enjoy. I mean, for me this year, it was a writer called Don Winslow. I had not read his books before, but somebody, a local bookshop, were the first people to push one of his books into my hands. And suddenly I found myself reading 7, 8, 9 of his books. I'm a lifelong fan, and that is a real joy. I think there is no greater gift that you can give somebody than a book they've never heard of.
I agree with that, and I'm going to be fascinated to hear what you think about what happened to me in a library. I went into a library and the lady said, well, yes, there are all your books, which was very flattering. But I said to her, I want to leave with something I've never read before, because you're dealing with people who've not only touched books all their lives, but touched people who've given them reports on books all their lives. And she said, Jeffrey, have you ever read Stefan Zweig? And I said, no. I was 62 years old. I said, I've never read Stefan Zweig. She said, Beware of Pity is a work of genius. And he only wrote 2 novels because he was in Austria when he was, hold your breath, Anthony, and those people listening. In 1947, he was #1 in the bestsellers list right across the world. And people are now discovering him again. And his non-fiction books are even as good, if not better, than his fiction books. And when people say to me, Jeffrey, what do you want to do when you grow up? I say, I want to be Stefan Zweig. He has that gift of storytelling and writing.
I've written down the title and the name, and I shall get it. That's my tip for the day. My recommendation. I said I love to hear about books I don't know. I'll let you know the next time I see you what I think of Beware of Pity.
I think it's a masterpiece, and I'm now waiting for you to give me a book to read, Anthony, that I have missed and therefore can take advantage, because you're going to tell me something I must get immediately.
Okay, let me think for a moment. I'm going to recommend a book that was recommended to me, and it was recommended by Sebastian Faulks, actually.
Great writer.
And it's a book by someone called A.E. Ellis. And it was recommended to me because Sebastian said it was his favorite book, and I'd never heard of it. And it's called The Rack.
The Rack.
I'm not sure. Now, will you like it, Jeffrey? I have recommended books to you in the past that you have not liked. Why have I chosen that one? It's set in a clinic that is treating tuberculosis. And it is one of the most painful novels I have ever read. It is a dreadfully sad, painful, difficult book. But I was mesmerized by it. I thought the language of it was fantastic, and it was beautifully done. However, I'm going to do two books because even as I say that one, that was to me one of the great discoveries of literature, a real masterpiece, and a book about suffering that was so real and so beautifully done. But I'm going to recommend another book by a man called John Franklin Bardeen, The Deadly Percheron, Percheron. And it is, for me, one of the greatest murder mystery stories ever written. And it's even got a title that nobody understands what it means. What's a percheron? A percheron, since you ask, is a small horse. So The Deadly Percheron by John Franklin Bardeen, he only wrote 4 novels, by the way, begins with a man visiting a psychiatrist who says that leprechauns are paying him to wear flowers in his hat.
Must be Irish.
And the psychiatrist decides to go and meet the leprechauns and discovers that they exist. The man is then asked to deliver a percheron to an actress who is murdered. And that's as much as I'm going to tell you of the story. It is one of the most bizarre, convoluted, nightmarish vortexes of a novel you will ever come across. And forget The Rack, it's too serious for us. I'm going to suggest instead The Deadly Percheron. Give it a go, and you will love it.
I worry now about recommending Stefan Zweig, because actually what you won't miss and what you will ring me about and tell me immediately is there isn't any question about the quality of his work. There isn't any question about his scholarship. There isn't any question about his class. But his story, just to give those watching a little outline, is of a general who's at a dinner party, and everybody is admiring him because of his record. But he has a story he hasn't told anyone about the biggest mistake he made in his life. It's that simple, and I could not put it down.
When was it written?
He was dominating literature between 1940 and 1945. People queued outside German bookshops for his books. It's been translated by that wonderful lady, Anthea Bell, who I admire so much, who's done, of course, Tolstoy, and he's done many of the great French writers, but has also done Stefan Zweig. And I had the honor, I would love to have met Stefan Zweig. He sadly committed suicide because he believed Hitler was going to win, and he couldn't bear the idea, which was terrible. So I invited Anthea Bell round to the old vicarage in Cambridge. And of course, she knew so much about the man, and she translated all his works, that it was a privilege to listen to her talking about him. But this was a man, Anthony, who everyone who read knew about between 1935 and 1945. And here am I, dare I say it, talking to an intellectual writer who's never read him. So my little new task is to bring him back into fashion.
Well, so this is a good start. I will read him, and I'll tweet and recommend him, and word of mouth will pick up. But I have to say, Jeffrey, there are so many great novels that I haven't read. I sometimes think to myself, with years diminishing, the number of years that I have left, am I reading this book now for the last time? And will I have time to read the sequel and one after that and so on? You know, the curse of 19th century fiction is that I keep rereading it. And that's I sometimes think to myself, why are you rereading this book for the second or third time when there are so many books you have yet to discover?
I picked up, because I hadn't read it and my son William criticized me, I picked up Hotel du Lac 3 days ago. I've read it immediately straight through. And of course, it's a class act. And so I'm with you. I will go to my grave, I fear, with so many books I should have read. But the problem is you're right. There's an awful lot of damn good books out there, and you can't be reading. What's that that's just come on my screen? What's just come on my screen? There's something on my screen.
My dog wants to join in.
Is that your inspiration there? What's he called?
Chase. Chase is one.
We're allowed to see, Kate.
He's a Labrador, and he's displayed butt in on this conversation.
Lucky man.
He sat there long. He said, "When is he before?"
I'm only allowed cats. Mary only allows me cats.
You have posh cats like Abyssinians.
No. Well, now that's a very good question. Now we're going in the right direction. Mary has a Burmese snooty. Well, of course she is. Dame Mary Archer. Of course she has a Burmese snooty. The pub during COVID closed down, and the pub cat went around the village looking for a home. And we have adopted this scruffy black and white object. So that's my cat called Hector. Her cat is called Sanita, and is very snooty. So
how do you get on?
Oh, I don't get on well with.
No, do the two cats like each other? That's the main point. Does Snooty Cat get on with Gutter Cat?
Well, it hasn't been easy bringing them together. I'd be bound to say that. But now, yes, they're licking each other. Yes.
I won't ask where. That's great.
Quite right, you older man. Good.
I meant in which part of the house, Geoffrey? I meant, are they in the room with you? Is all I meant.
Oh yeah, they. Hector now has a run of the house.
Dare I make a suggestion instead, that we seem to have spent pretty much of our allotted hour not taking any questions and not even discussing to any great extent our books. And are our publishers going to fire us when they find out that we have used this time in pleasant but uncommercial chit chat? Should we have a minute to at least if I were to ask you, since I'm here, just to sort of, would that be all right? Do you think that would be a thing to do?
Absolutely.
To just say something about the new book, which is coming out on the same day as my book, and perhaps to explain to the librarian listening why they should plump for your one rather than mine. Although, of course, we know they'll go for both. The title.
The title. Now, who are you are you talking to me?
I'm talking to Geoffrey.
Oh, you're talking to Geoffrey.
Oh, I apologize. My book is
the first William Wallace book. It's the first Wallace novel.
The fourth.
What?
The fourth William Warwick.
There you are. See, that's how ill-informed I am. Let's. So it is. So which rank is he in this book?
The fourth William Warwick novel is. It opens with his commanding officer, the Hawk, Commander Hawksley, telling him that the commissioner has given orders that 4 cold cases.
Oh, this is the 4 cold cases one. That's right.
And he has to solve them because the commander and the commissioner both feel if people get away with murder, why wouldn't they do it again? You are then told what the 4 murders are, and you watch his team set about capturing all 4 people. So there's 4 intertwined stories right through the book with a twist at the end, I hope, that will shock you.
Oh, we love twists at the end, and you are the master of them, a shocking twist at the end. And is this therefore, would you say, in the genre, is this, because your books are so full of character and history and fact, is this also, though, a sort of a whodunit, a murder mystery?
No, not quite, because we know who's done it. We know who's Mr. Evil. The art is finding how to catch him because he's every bit as clever.
Is the villain of the piece therefore a present character throughout the story, and we are aware of him or her?
Yes, at the beginning of the book I'm writing, he's in jail, but he isn't there 2 chapters later. So yes, he runs right through and dominates the books as William, continually spending his life trying to get the better of him. He's called Miles Faulkner, and he's a bright guy, Anthony.
He would, I imagine he would have to be. And
Now, let me ask you.
Has he appeared in any of the other books, or this is his first appearance?
Oh, no, he runs right through.
In
The art fraud. He's a great collector of art. And
one of the other book on the art thing.
The opening book, Nothing Ventured, is about art fraud, where he first comes across him when he's trying very hard to steal a Rembrandt. And they know he's trying to steal a Rembrandt, and they have to stop it before he does. But no, I'm not going to tell you anymore.
Very good.
So tell me your latest book.
My book is this one, A Line to Kill. It's the third book in a series of books I write about a detective called Daniel Hawthorne. The setup being that Hawthorne is not a very pleasant private detective, and he has hired a writer to write about his adventures, because basically he needs the money. He's not earning enough as a private detective. And where things take a twist, in my case, is that the writer he has hired to do this work is me. So instead of being the author of the book, I am, as it were, instead of being Conan Doyle, I'm Dr. Watson. I'm inside my own book, following in the footsteps of a detective whom I don't really like. And this time, the two of us head off to the island of Alderney, which is a tiny channel island, which is only 3 miles long, where there is a literary festival where we are promoting one of the other books. This is the third book. We're promoting the first one, The Word is Murder, at a literary festival. There has never been a murder on Alderney. And of course, that changes very soon after we arrive. So it's a very classic sort of Agatha Christie metafiction detective story with a smile to it on an island in Alderney. So there we are. We've done our duty.
I read the first one and really did. You achieved what you wanted to. I hated the private detective.
Well, you say that, but actually I'm trying to make him a warmer and nicer human being.
Oh, he's going to be.
You agree, Jeffrey, you cannot really follow the adventures of a character whom you continue to hate.
Oh, but I did.
The thing about Hawthorne is you've got to try and work out, why is he this bad man? Why does he have these unacceptable views? What happened to him in his life that made him feel? And that is the tension of the books. As I follow him on these different murder stories, I find out more and more about some big tragedy in his childhood that has turned him into this very difficult human being.
What I found brilliant about the early books was that you were able as a writer to let normal readers know what a writer goes through and what bloody silly questions he gets from someone like your detective and how he deals with them and the problem that is. That came over to me very clearly indeed. And I enjoyed it, of course, as a writer myself. But you also did something that you made very clear when you were speaking just then. When you said, when I went to Albany, I went to the festival, of course, you were writing about something you know about. And the reader will say, oh my God, he's been there. Oh my God, he's been to that festival. And I try with politics and with art to do the same thing in the hope that the reader will say he knows his art, he knows his politics. And I think every writer does it, Anthony. And I met a lady the other day who complained to me. She said, I want to be a writer, Jeffrey, but I haven't met all the interesting people you've met, and I haven't had the interesting life you've had. I said, oh, what do you do? She said, I work in a hairdresser's. I said, you'll get more stories in a hairdresser's every day than I will get in a year. So people should write about what they know about, the people they know about, the things they understand. And the reader will say, wow, got it, I'm there. And you do that, Anthony.
I think we both do, actually, because we've been in this game long enough to know that what you've just said is absolutely true. You must write from a position of strength. And, you know, when I'm writing the Alex Rider books, I always say that in Stormbreaker, for example, Alex Rider jumps out of a helicopter over the Science Museum, smashes through the glass roof and shoots the Prime Minister by mistake, incidentally, with an AKR machine gun. And I always say to myself, that doesn't sound like a very realistic scenario. But if you know enough about the helicopter and if you've been on the roof of that museum and you know that glass window is there, and you know a little bit about machine guns, and you put some of that authority into the writing, then you'll be able to sell the fantasy. Fantasy thrives on fact. So the more you know and the more experience you put into the books, the easier it is to sell the fantasy and the story. And that's what I've always believed.
Do you also find when you get told stories by other people, with the William Warwicks, I have a brilliant chief superintendent, retired, advising me. And he often will tell me stories I know nobody will believe, but when they read them, they will say, gosh, that has to be true. For example, the opening of one of the early books, I said to the head of the murder squad, the head of the drug squad, you're useless. You've taught me that there are 250,000 people on heroin, 500,000 people on crack cocaine, 5 million people on marijuana. Thanks very much. That'll get in the book. It's a fact, but you've never given me a story. And I was walking out the door with him and I said, has anyone ever really annoyed you? And he said, yes, I was chasing a burglar who was very professional. And what really annoyed me is he knew I was chasing him. And I knew he was chasing him. And what worst of all, at Christmas, he used to give me a hamper from Harrods as a Christmas present. So I got him by the throat, Anthony, and said, don't you know a story when you see one? And that's the first 5 pages of the second William Warwick. It's the commander and his team sitting at a table looking at a hamper, because I know all my readers will know it's true.
Well, that's how these Hawthorne novels began. We had a guy working on a TV series I did, and he was one of these experts who come in from the police to help writers like myself get it right. And it's very interesting. I mean, that sort of story, you couldn't make it up, as they say. And I remember one of the things this guy did is he told me that when they go to a crime scene, they put this white stuff around their nose because the bodies can smell so terrible. So when we wrote this drama, this is a show called Collision, it was called Injustice. I wrote it some years ago. We had the guys come on and we have this whole thing with this pot of stuff. And just that little tiny moment of doing that made you say, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yes, it's real. I quite agree. I got one from my chief superintendent. I said, you've been to public school and then to university. They must have teased you a lot. He said, yes, they did. I said, give me a really good example. He said, well, I came in one morning to the police station. This is in the book. I came into the police station one morning and the desk sergeant said, there's been a problem. There's been a problem, Warwick. Go immediately to Boots and get this prescription. Get this prescription now. And he said, I ran down to Boots and there was a long queue at the prescription counter, but I went to the front and said, I'm a constable. I've been told I've got to get, and handed it over to the lady behind the counter and said, I've got to get this. And she looked at it and took down a packet of condoms and gave it to him. And when he walked out, he read the note which said, I'm a young constable and I've got this new girlfriend and I think I'm in with a chance. What should I do next? And I realized it was true. And I realized my readers would know it was true.
Lovely. Initiation. It was great.
Yes, yes, yes.
Virginia.
Should we end on the condom story?
It seems an appropriately louche ending, which only could have come from Jeffrey, not from me. So that does seem a fairly decent place to stop. I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be talking to Jeffrey. As I say, someone I've been a friend of and admired for many, many years. And thank you to you, Virginia, for arranging this, and to the librarians who I assume we don't know, Jeffrey, if there are any actually listening to us, because they could have all gone by now. But I'm thrilled by the success of my books and the support I'm getting in America. So I want to thank them as well for listening to us today.
May I add my thanks and say it's always a privilege, because one tries to remember how many people have been responsible for making one's career a success. And librarians are top of that list, and I'm very grateful. Thank you very much, Virginia. Thank you very much for allowing me to be on with Anthony. It's been a privilege. He's among the writers I truly admire.
Well, thank you. And thank you both. honestly, if you go back and you look at these comments, people are just overwhelmed and commenting on that they have been to a bazillion Zooms and nothing comes close to this hour of conversation, which was not planned. And I think that's what made it so wonderful. We don't need to ask any questions. Just the fact that just listening to the two of you talk to each other about everything under the sun, including book recommendations, is just absolutely wonderful. You're going to get a lot of phone calls from librarians who want you gentlemen to come on the road. So brought her on yourselves.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Archer, Over My Dead Body. Anthony Horowitz, A Line to Kill. Both books are on sale on October 19th. There's not a thing more that I need to say except thank you both so much. Congratulations on these incredible reads, and thank you for your time today. And librarians, thank you for watching and for all the love that you've shared in our chat room today. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Good night, people.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.